everybody. You may remember that a while back I made a video about a bunch of laptop batteries, 12-cell laptop batteries that went onto eBay and were a pretty good deal, and I bought a couple. Here they are. Well, these aren't actually the same ones because right after I made that video, the person took down all like 1,400 of those batteries and reposted them as a different type. So I think what happened was he accidentally posted them up as the wrong type of battery, but these are, I guess, the ones that he meant to post up, but I got them, and let's test out to see what kind of health the cells have. Here's an up close of the cells, and they're lithium ion. They're 14.8 volts, which would actually be a little higher because you'd be charging the cells to 4.2 volts instead of the 3.7 that they registered as, and it has 6.6 amp hours, which I believe means that each cell would have 2.2 amp hours. And so the battery looks pretty new, and it does not look used, which is very nice. So let's open it up. Feels like the cells are going that way, so looks like we got blue ones. Awesome. At least in this one, but this one could be an entirely different color. It could be purple even. I gotta warn you, be careful when cutting around here, because you could arc over the parts and melt your knife. I've done that several times, because that's the ends of the batteries. Here it comes. There we have the batteries. Awesome! See, I have to say, pretty much all of these are at 3.7 volts or so, which is very good. I'm very pleased with that. So we come over here to my universal power supply. Go to 4.4 because by the time this thing warms up, it'll go down to 4.2. So bring the voltage down, and we shall connect these to this. It's reading 3.6 volts, and we'll bring the voltage up. And we're limiting the input current to 1 amp. Well, in the second battery pack, we don't have nearly as many of the sticky tape stuff inside there, so that's good. It's really good. And the cells have different markings on them, so they're different. They're most likely from a different company. And these ones are actually labeled 2200 milliamp hour. So I was right about calculating it, judging by the outside voltage that it said on there. So now that we have the cells out, let's check the voltages. 3.5 volts, 3.5 volts, roughly 3.5 volts, I think. Yep. And the last one should be 3.5 volts. Yep. Well, 3.47, but you can round it up to 3.5. 3.5 volts is, it's not ideal, but I don't think that it'll really affect the whole capacity of it, so that's good. I think these should be all fine. Now the only question is about, do they really have the original 2200 milliamp hours of capacity? And we'll charge these right whenever these ones get done charging. So I charged these 9 cells for about 3 hours at 2 amps, and they took quite a bit of power. And then I hooked up to my iMax B6 so it'd charge it safely, or more safely, and it took another 7.3 amp hours. And that's really promising because that means that, I mean, whenever these started, they were already at about half capacity anyway. So they took about 1.2 amp hours per cell. So they might have the full 2.2 amp hours inside of them. That's awesome. So now while I go to work, let's discharge 3 cells and see what capacity we get. If we get 6.6 amp hours or more, that means we have at least 2.2 amp hours per cell. There we go. So the results are in. We've got 6.3 amp hours, and that means 2.126, I think, amp hours per cell. So each cell is 2100 amp hours. That's not bad. That's comparable to the original, or their marked 2200 milliamp hours. And dead, they go back up to 3.45 volts, the same voltage as these. So I guess these are pretty much dead. I'm pretty happy with these. Not bad for $1.20 per cell. So out of those 24 cells that I bought, there was one row of bad cells, or not necessarily bad, but they weren't assembled properly at the factory, and evidently they didn't know how to charge them, so they charged them wrong. This cell is at 0.2 of a volt, or 0.5 of a volt, I can't remember. This cell was at 0 volts, or I think it was like 50 millivolts, still basically 0 for a battery. And this one was at 3.9 volts. Well, that's almost full, whereas these ones were originally at 3.7 volts. So what happened was, evidently these were not soldered together, or spot welded together properly. So these two never got a charge throughout their entire life. This one was overcharged because they were expecting to be charging 3 cells, but so they probably charged this one to 4.5 volts. Or higher, and so now it's only gone down to 4.9 volts, and these ones, all the rest were charged to 4.2 volts, and by now they were down to 3.7 volts. So they didn't really know how to make it, I don't think. But that doesn't mean these cells are ruined. There's just a special way you have to charge them. Now, whenever the cells are below 1 volt, you want to charge them with as little amperage as possible, maybe like 10 milliamps of current. Let's hook it up and we'll show you. So the battery is connected and is reading 0.1 volts, which is way too low. This would normally short out a cell. So we're going to limit the amperage to 0, so it's not putting any amperage in it. We're going to trump the volts. So now, if we weren't pulling any power, it would be at 3 volts, but it's not letting any amperage through, so it's curtailing the volts until it's putting out no capacity current. We're going to slowly bring up the milliamps. So we're charging with a little bit, like 10, let's go to 15 milliamps of current. And see, the voltage is going up. It's taking a charge pretty fast, actually. It's reached 1 volt, so let's bring up the current a little bit more. Let's say 30, that sounds about right. And we'll go until it reaches like 1.5 or 2 or so. So now it's 1.6, so we'll bring the current up a little bit more. Because once it gets past 1.5, that's when it starts to get more stable. Because if I were to take this cell, which is at 0, and I were to charge it with like an amp of current, it would most likely just short out and get really hot, and you'd ruin your battery. And even though it's been heavily damaged, it still has about a half of its original capacity, and half of its original capacity, like 1 amp hour per cell, that's still quite a bit. An extra amp hour for electric bike battery can give you an extra mile or 2, so it doesn't hurt to use these because they're very useful. In fact, my first bicycle battery pack was made entirely out of cells that were under voltage, so it got me several hundred miles, and it gets me like 20 miles per charge, and it only cost me $80. So it's very efficient to use these instead of just letting them waste. I know some people have said you should never use these if they're under a voltage, but just take some care with them and don't rough them around too much, and they'll work okay for you. And now that the voltage is over 3 volts, let's just go all out and charge it with 1 amp, because it's pretty much stable now. You can just treat it like a regular lithium cell. So I have to say I'm pretty happy with these batteries. They're not a name brand, and they're low quality, but nowhere near as like a dishonest quality like Ultrafire or Trustfire. These are their rated capacity, and they look like I'd trust going using them as a battery pack. Just because they don't have the name brand on them doesn't mean they're not useful, because they are proving to be okay sells. And not counting, they're a good price. So, that eBay auction is a good idea. And I think I'll buy some more. Hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. See ya!